Backwards Compatible, the video game retrospective podcast where we discuss, analyze, and reflect on some of the most notable and varied titles in gaming history. From childhood favorites to contemporary classics, I'm your host, Garrett.
And I'm Chase. And just let me say, Merry Christmas, Garrett.
Merry Christmas to you, bud. Man, it's less than a week away by the time we're recording this.
Yeah, I
And
know. Of course, by the time you, the listeners, are hearing this, it's probably sometime in January, but for us, it's the Christmas season! Oh boy!
Here comes Santa Claus.
And just look at the game we're talking about. It's very Christmassy. I mean, there's a winter section.
I guess it's The Last of Us, guys. The Last of Us.
Ooh, yeah,
Woo.
this is a game that we've wanted to talk about for a minute because this is just one of those games that, when talking about the greatest games out there, you gotta have this one on the list, if for no other reason than its legacy and influence over the last decade.
No kidding. What this game did, it pioneered a new way of developing games, which has stuck around since its release.
Yeah, it pretty much was the codifier of the whole what's been coined as the cinematic adventure game genre. You know the type. Games that are much more story and narrative driven, usually involve a lot of walking under or in through crevices and all that, and usually involve the main character learning how to be a parent.
Well, to be a parent again, I particularly like the flavor of The Last of Us.
The
And
Last of Us. Just where do you
Mhm.
even begin with this game? We might as well begin with what our own reactions were to this game when it came out. This came out in June 13th, 2013 for the PlayStation 3, developed by Naughty Dog and directed by Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley. Man, Neil Druckmann, he's been quite the busybody these days. Pretty good. Good for him.
Good for him. Of course, if you're a fan of The Last of Us and when part two kind of came around, things have happened with that, but hopefully,
Yeah, so quick
yeah.
disclaimer, this is just going to be on the first Last of Us game,
Yes.
specifically the original game, although in my case, the 2014 remaster. I have not yet played The Last of Us Part 2. It is on my to-do list. I will get to it eventually, but I have been unfortunately spoiled on a few key plot points, but as it is, I have not yet played Part 2.
Yeah, but we're going to talk about their good works during this time, as well as some of their challenges during development as we kind of go into the game. Even though Neil, I don't really care too much for him either, but you can't deny that he has some skill.
Yeah, you can't deny that Druckmann has a vision for where he wants to take this series. Also, like I said, this will mostly be on the original version of the game.
hmm
The part one, what would you call it, a remake or a remaster? I know there's an
I
argument
want to
on that
say
one.
remaster. It's just like update the graphics, kind of fix a little bit of issues that the first game had, and yeah,
There's
like it's just the remaster.
From what I can tell, there is some changes to the actual game, and there's a few extra Easter eggs in the Part 1 remake or remaster that I will mention when we get there, but again, this will just be the original version since that's the one we're both most familiar with.
hmm
Anyway, so where were you when this game came out? Where were you? This game came out when I was through about mid high school, 2013. That would have been my junior year, I want to say.
This was when let's see here. I want to say I just finished my 8th grade semester and I was going
Man, you're
into
young.
get out of here. um when this game came out, I actually wasn't too into like gaming news and stuff like that at that age. So I just knew that it was a zombie game and people then started talking a lot about it. I kept hearing it, I kept seeing it on YouTube. So I'm like, okay, well, let me watch PewDiePie, which kind of introduced me to The Last of Us. And I watched his like gameplay through it. And man, I want to say it's one of my favorite playthroughs. I did later play the game for myself and it's still hit hard. It still had everything from great mechanics to storytelling to characters and as well as just the pacing of everything. It's just that's my whole thing about The Last of Us. That's my history.
As for me, I remember when this game came out, it was part of what I call the big three of 2013. BioShock Infinite had come out that year, Grand Theft Auto 5 was coming out. 2013, really looking back on it, was a huge year for gaming because not only did those three games come out, but the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One were about to release by the end of the year. The Wii
hmm
U existed.
Wii U.
It was just a changing time for console gaming, and even PC gaming was kinda going through a few shifts of its own around this time.
What we're saying is that gaming turned a corner.
The Last of Us, this is one of those games that, at least as far as the AAA side of things is concerned, changed the direction that the industry was going. From this point onward, there's like pre The Last of Us for storytelling in games, and then there's the post era of storytelling in video games. It had been moving in this more cinematic, more narrative driven style for a good while at this point. I mean, hell, you could argue like games like Metal Gear Solid on the PS1 were hugely cinematic and very story and plot driven. You also had games like God of War 3 or Resident Evil 4, which were going through bigger and bigger set pieces, or the Uncharted series, another previous Naughty Dog game. So, gaming had been moving in this direction, but while they were bigger in scale and scope, they weren't necessarily nailing the character, the emotion, the pathos of storytelling. This game has pathos, Garrett. Pathos.
Pathos, what a word. But I also want to add to what you're saying is that this game made it grounded, made it feel like this could be us.
This was the game that everyone looked at as, well, now we gotta try and do that for our game story. All eyes were on this game. And yeah, not every game has to be like The Last of Us, but from this point on, you look over the last 10 years, PlayStation exclusives in particular have really done with this style. Like I said earlier, this did codify the cinematic adventure genre.
Not to mention that with this adventure genre coming out and people wanting more, it was an unsaturated market and it really boomed the gaming industry, which helped the economy. So gaming helps,
Yeah.
gaming helps everybody.
What's funny though is while I did actually buy this game when it came out, it just sat on my backlog for like 3 years until I played the
Oh, wow.
remastered version a few years later, like around
Boy, what were
2016 or
you
so.
doing?
Like I said, I was really into the PC gaming side of thing. My PlayStation 3 and PS4 were kind of just there for a few years before I really started reinvigorating my love of console gaming. So, yeah, it just sat on my to-do list for a few years. But even though I didn't actually play the game when it came out, I still heavily associate it with that mid to late high school era of me and my buddies just sitting around talking about the best games we've played, going
Mhm.
on like the gaming subreddits or a lot of YouTube Let's Players and all that. Whenever I boot up that title screen and that guitar riff starts playing, it just
Mhm.
takes me back to that time.
It's talking about the music. Let's talk about our composer, Gustavo Santaolalla. Is
Yeah,
that right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I did watch a little bit of thing behind the making of The Last of Us. And from what I could tell from Gustavo, one, he's very passionate about his work. I want to say he was a great choice. I'm glad that he was the one to kind of bring us this sort of reading of emotion because it's like he was the guide for us, the player. Because the music is a big part in this. And the reason why people fell so much in love with this game, because the music was just enough to convey emotion. It wasn't
Right.
over grandiose. It wasn't something that was too minuscule to not even know. He made that perfect balance.
Yeah,
And
it's
he
very quiet and somber for the most part, and a lot of characters have specific motifs that accompany them.
mhm.
Joel's daughter, Sarah, her theme plays over the course of the game whenever him and Ellie start getting a little closer.
It's just a masterpiece in I don't know, it's just this is a game that many gaming studios hope to make, something as influential as this.
Yeah, these type of games have become a bit more common and a lot of narrative games have upped their level since then, but even to this day, the little subtle character moments, the writing, the interactions, the voice recording, it's all
Mhm.
so natural and organic. These really do feel like real actual humans going through these events. Not just voice acting, but also they did the motion capture.
So, in terms of voice actors, we have Troy Baker, who played Joel, Ashley Johnson, phenomenal actress playing Ellie. We also have Merle Dandridge. She has many works, and she's playing Marlene, who's the leader of the Fireflies. Then we have Mr. W. Earl Brown, who played Bill. Brandon Scott, who plays the older brother of a pair of brothers we meet during our travels.
Henry.
Yes, yes, Henry. Nolan North playing David, who we will get into. I don't want to talk about David
Oh,
too much on
David.
this one, but we will. And then a fun little cameo that you can find later in the game of Mr. Steve Bloom.
Good old Spike Spiegel.
Mhm.
Another cameo, well, it's not necessarily a cameo, but it is a smaller role. But Robin Atkin Downs played Robert in the beginning of the game. He's that arms dealer that Tess and Joel are going after.
So we have this grand cast of actors that just portray the emotions that we need and went through a lot of sweat because I'm sure it gets pretty hot on the set, especially in them spandex that always gives them wedgies, which is what they like to talk about. But it's harder for actors to talk to each other or at least act with a purpose when they're not acting with somebody else instead of like just in a studio. But overall, they knew what emotion to convey because they acted it out. And I don't know. I always found that to be so amazing and so great in any sort of production. It makes it more fun.
You want to move on to the development side of things?
Sure. So they started the development as a Jack and Daxter sequel back in 2009. Then they realized they wanted something different.
Yeah, what they wanted didn't really fit the tone or the ambitious level of Jack and Daxter, which is a shame because Jack and Daxter will always hold a special place for me, and maybe one day we'll get another game.
So it was then teased in the beginning of another game that Naughty Dog is very famous for, the Uncharted series, specifically Uncharted 3. And it had a newspaper headline where scientists are still struggling to understand a deadly fungus.
Which was not
Now,
supposed to be in that game because this was before The Last of Us was officially revealed, and it kind of just slipped by Naughty Dog, and they were like, whoopsie.
yeah.
During development, once they settled on the idea of a zombie apocalypse, mostly from George A. Romero films.
Then somebody got to thinking and they saw a whole ant colony be mind controlled by this fungi. This is where I think was a great choice. Having a fungal infection for the zombies and stuff like that. It's just amazing how they conveyed that into human form. Really, what this fungus did to these ants was first, it would get into their brains and basically make them do involuntary actions and they did spread into an ant colony and eventually the ant colony would collapse and crumble from the inside out.
Ha,
And
could you imagine a highly contagious and devastating plague?
oh wow, what kind of time are we living in?
Anyway,
uh yeah, so
so after they got the idea of the infection down, they looked at what would our post-apocalyptic world kind of look like. They looked at some images of, I don't know if how apocryphal this is, but Hurricane Katrina, like the devastation wrought by that natural disaster for what buildings that are flooded and have a lot of plant growth kind of look like. A lot of
mhm.
George A. Romero zombie films, as mentioned. The idea of the relationship between the main characters partially came from the movie The Road, and I actually think there's a scene that is a direct reference to The Road later on in the game, as well as Children of Men, classic movie. For gameplay, they cited games such as Eco as the sort of escort like mission, as well as Resident Evil 4, and you can definitely see some of Resident Evil 4's DNA mixed into the gameplay elements of The Last of Us.
And they built this picture of this world that's bleak but also beautiful.
That's a major recurring theme throughout this game is life goes on. Grass is still growing, trees are still growing, the animals are just going about things as normal. Humanity's been devastated, and that's not to say animals haven't been unaffected completely, but the world keeps turning. The sky is still blue. There's still rain, there's still snow. Giraffes now wander the streets of Salt Lake City, their natural habitat.
Let's turn our focus onto the populations of people. So, first is well, let's talk about the common person who's living under quarantine. They developed this system of people where I think they're called ration cards. That's kind of like their whole currency in between them.
Yeah, you see
And
stuff that's like 15 ration cards for a dead rat.
yeah, in like the marketplace and also you get a walkthrough of what a quarantine zone would look like. There's like
Yeah,
dogfights, there's
Boston.
people sitting around. It was it Boston? Yeah.
Yeah, the first quarantine zone and where the game starts after the prologue is in Boston. And I gotta say, for all you Half-Life fans out here, this gave me major City 17 vibes, the whole military dystopia kind of place. Kinda disappointed we didn't hear a guard look at Joel and say, pick up that can.
Pick up that can. Yeah, and so let's talk also about the government themselves, or like, well, it's not really the government; it's sort of the people who are in charge of quarantine. The quarantine zone, run by FEDRA, the Federal Disaster Response Agency, was a group that was made of course, military like personnel. They had their rules and stuff, but I'm glad that they kind of humanized them a little bit. You know, there's just people who are going about their day that decide to take up a job because, well, it was favorable to their situation. When you're walking through the city, you see Fedra agents scanning these people, these residents of this building, and well, one of them says infected. So there are devices to tell whether a person's infected or not, and they shot him down, and yeah, that was the end of it. And that's just how they can keep everything under control. But you can see that it's starting to crumple in their society. They even
I wouldn't
mentioned
say it's starting. I would argue that it was never really all that coherent or glued together as they make it seem. It's just a full on military dictatorship at this point. They are taking down people for the slightest indication of infection. And yeah, on paper, you want to deal with that, but I don't know. I feel like the Fedra agents are just using this as justification to enforce their iron fist on these citizens.
and some people take that view and become part of rebellious groups, such as the Fireflies. The Fireflies' big thing is come be the light or come see the light. These Fireflies are just your everyday people that were in these quarantine zones that had enough.
They're the anti fascist resistance group, essentially.
Fedra kind of goes off to the side because really Fedra is only in the beginning part.
Yeah, Fedra doesn't really play too big of a role once you get out of Boston. They're mostly serve as more narrative opposition to the Fireflies, but once you leave Boston with Ellie, it doesn't they don't really play much of a role in the story from that point forward.
Right, in which shows they don't really have any influence, of course, outside of the city that they are quote unquote protecting.
But let's rewind a little bit. We've set the
Mhm.
stage for what The Last of Us mainly is, but let's go back, about 20 years, the distant, far off year of 2013. Let's
All
talk
right.
about this opening prologue of the game because this just sets the tone not just for the story and what it's about, who the main character of Joel is, but for the player, for the audience. This sets up what kind of game you're about to play. It opens up in the year 2013. Joel's just coming home after a pretty bad day at work on the phone with his brother Tommy, and his 14-year-old daughter Sarah is on the couch waiting for him to come home because it's Joel's birthday, and she got him a watch, which he jokes about, oh, it's broken, it doesn't work.
And of course, when the Sarah runs over to it and she goes, ha ha, it shows
Right.
that relationship to it. That's sort of our start to developing a relationship with Sarah through the eyes of Joel.
And of course, Joel's watch remains broken throughout the rest of the game, which Ellie does comment on. Nice little callback. Sarah wakes up in the middle of the night and finds out that her father Joel is missing from the home. Walking around the house, she goes into Joel's room and the TV is on with the news. And this was a really cool moment the first time I played it. It's a small thing and isn't really all that impressive, but the fact that you see on the news an explosion from a gas leak that happens in downtown Austin, Texas, and then you look at the same time outside the bedroom window, you see that explosion in Austin. That's just really cool how it syncs up like that. It really immerses you into this game's world like it's actually happening. Sarah wanders around the house calling out for Joel, and there's a little PlayStation 3 under the living room TV. Little wink and a nudge there.
Thank you, PS3.
Yes, I wonder what platform this game was made for. Anyway, she goes into Joel's office on the bottom floor, and Joel runs in, grabs his gun. Their neighbor rushes in, trying to bite at Joel. He shoots the neighbor in the face because obviously he's infected and all that. There's another small detail that really unsettled me the first time I played through. As you're wandering through the house of Sarah, you hear a neighbor's dog barking, and after a certain
Mhm.
point, it just immediately cuts off. Oop, sucks to be that dog.
I mean, it shows that this infection does not give a shit.
I don't know how well you remember, but from about 2009 to about 2013 ish, yeah, about this time, zombie apocalypse was a huge trend for a lot of pop culture at the time. I mean, we had The Walking
Mhm.
Dead, there were a lot of music stuff, there was a lot of songs and music themed around zombies.
Artwork.
Yeah, zombies was just like the big thing back in these days, and I feel like The Last of Us came at sort of the tail end of that era, so it's fitting. It's a fitting conclusion to that whole trend. Anyway, so Sarah is understandably completely shocked by seeing her father murder her next door neighbor. The comment of where she just whimpers, "I saw him this morning," humanizes her instantly. And it also immediately tells you, the audience, that there's going to be death in this game, and the characters are not just going to ignore and shrug it off. It will have a mental and emotional impact on them for the most part.
So then Joel's brother Tommy pulls right on up. They get in and they do their best to escape Austin, Texas. And you can hear the frantic in the conversation between Joel
Yeah.
and Tommy as you take
I
control of Sarah.
The fact that you're playing this prologue from Sarah's perspective and not Joel's is just really great, because you are seeing things from this confused young teen's perspective. You don't really know too much about Joel. Where was he? What's going on? You don't know much about Tommy either, other than what you're hearing. You're over listening this frantic conversation, and it puts you in her shoes. She's just this young kid, doesn't know what's going on. She just saw her father kill their neighbor. Joel and Uncle Tommy are arguing about what to do, where to go, what's going on. And you feel that confusion and panic and worry with Sarah, with her the whole way.
And one event that really point out what sort of survivors Joel and Tommy and Sarah were going to be is they kind of are driving down this back road and they see a family walking down. Well, Tommy and Sarah was like, we should help them. Well, Joel's like, no, we need to keep going, which kind of shows that Joel is in this survivor mindset. He wants to
Mm-hmm.
protect the people that he loves. He does
Yeah.
not want to take any chances.
I was just going to bring that up. I'm glad you did, because this moment establishes the kind of survivor Joel is. He's not going to go for sympathy. He's not going to make himself vulnerable to an unknown factor or variant. He knows what his goal is, who he is protecting, who he decides is worth protecting, and he's not going to let anyone in onto this family intimate circle. And I think that establishes that personality in him right here at the beginning, because as Tommy points out, that family has a kid with them, and Joel points out, so do we, and just drives past. And that again cements the kind of person Joel is. Eventually they try to head onto the expressway, but everyone and their mother, as Tommy puts it, had the exact same idea, and it's completely gridlocked. One guy gets out of the car to like yell, "Hey, move your asses off the road!" And then he gets completely swarmed by infected from a nearby hospital.
And just like that, he also killed his partner, whoever that was.
Yep. So Tommy takes the Jeep they're in off the E-way and goes straight into this little small town on the outskirts of Austin. And you see all the other survivors. It is just sheer panic and chaos in town. There's cars crashing into everything, including a gas station, which sets off a massive explosion.
After all this confusion, too, guess what? You get T-boned by somebody speeding down the main road, and it all kind of goes black. Now we're taking on the role of Joel. Well, Sarah now has a broken leg. Well, Joel, being such a hunk he is, picks up Sarah and starts running with Tommy covering them.
And as you're running through, infected are chasing you, and you feel the adrenaline as you're running through this small little valley between roads as Joel carrying Sarah. Infected all around you, and then finally you meet a military soldier guarding the expressway, the exit, and you're like, "Ah, relief, we're saved."
Well, then he gets to talk with the supervisor, and it kind of sounds concerning from what he's responding with. He says, "Sir, there's a little girl." He raises his gun, and Joel is reactionary, where he tries to protect his little girl. And he does get shot up, but not as bad as Sarah. She gets shot in the abdomen.
Yeah, Sarah
Yeah,
dies. Joel
yeah,
Joel
she
is saved
does.
at the last second by Tommy, who kills the soldier, but it's too late for Sarah, and Joel is trying to stop the bleeding and trying to save his baby girl, but it's too late. The
Yeah,
screen fades to black, and that's it for the prologue. This whole prologue was so unique to what I think a lot of, especially mainstream gamers, had experienced in games before. It was quiet for the most part. It was somber. It was emotional. It was immersive. It was cinematic, not to overuse a few buzzwords already. There had been similar experiences, sure, but nothing of this writing level or quality or intimacy before. The voice acting and the motion capture and the music went so far in conveying this is a serious drama with real organic characters and states.
Mhm.
This is the moment where I feel like everyone playing this game was like, oh, right, this game is something else.
The actors themselves, Troy Baker and Hannah Hayes, they report having to go to a really dark place. Hannah said something about having to think about her grandfather because that was her father figure and how he died. I'm not sure what Troy Baker had to go through. This take was done over and over and over again. He said 8 or 9 times, and he had to keep going to that dark place. And just said he was an emotional wreck. This scene, there's so much pain in the scene, and I'm so happy that the people who were behind it were so passionate about getting it right, because
Right.
doing it like that did it right.
One last
But
thing before we move on.
okay.
The fact that it's a military soldier is the one that pulls the trigger. It once again instills into both Joel and the player, don't trust anybody. Don't trust authority figures. Don't trust any other survivors. You can only look after yourself and the people, not even the people you consider family or close friends you can really trust.
And then the beautiful music starts playing again. Then the sort of like picking up of the tempo as more and more news sort of starts coming out. And it's kind of like we're seeing all this happening, all this society collapsing, and it's spreading all throughout from coast to coast, becoming more and more wild.
It's during these news broadcasts, as everything is falling apart to the infection, the cordyceps fungus, that a mention of the fireflies is established as this. You call them anti-government resistance, but what their initial goals at least are to restore the original American government, because as the news broadcast is explaining, government is cracking down on things. They are taking away citizens' rights and no freedom for you. You will do exactly what we say. It is a full-on military-run dystopia. Can't imagine what that's like.
Closest we got to it was isolation these
Yeah.
previous years.
Anyway,
But
let's not go
yeah,
down
let's
that
go.
tangent.
Let's go to 20 years later.
In the distant year of 2033. Weird to think we're halfway there now.
I know,
Hold
11 more
on.
years.
Ellie's 14 in 2033, so that means she would have been born in 2019, if my math is correct.
33 minus 14,
Yeah, 2019.
8, 2018.
Either way, kind of weird to think that at the time this game came out, Ellie wouldn't theoretically have been born for several more years, but now she would have been, what, 4 or 5 years old now?
Yeah, I know, in a different timeline.
But yes, it is 20 years later. Joel is now in his late 40s, and he's living in the Boston quarantine zone, working as a black market smuggler with his partner Tess.
And
Everyone
he's
loves
rocking that.
Tess.
Yeah, everyone loves Tess, and Joel is rocking that salt and pepper look.
Oh yeah, he is a foxy dilf.
Joel and Tess, they're smugglers in the Boston quarantine zone. Tess comes in after being hit up by a couple of thugs. It's sort of like a nice little banter in between, which this conversation sort of solidifies the relationship we have with Tess. Tess is a working partner that we trust.
I do like how they are explicitly working partners. There's really no love or intimacy between them. They are not like boyfriend, girlfriend, or dating. No, they are strictly business partners. And I like that. You know, men and women can just be friends, you guys. Although I
Mhm.
wouldn't necessarily call them. Would you call Tess and Joel friends? I feel like you can't really
I'm sure
apply that to them.
being social creatures as we are, I'm sure a time or two they have sort of like I think they kind of like had a friends with benefits kind of
Yeah, it's
relationship.
possible.
Yeah, like they do like grow those attachments to each other, but they kind of had that same mindset. They probably went through similar experiences, and that's
Yeah.
why they click so well.
Joel is very torn up over Tessa's death. Spoiler alert, but yeah, he
Well,
clearly.
spoiler alert after you say the spoiler.
Hey man, at this point. But yeah, Joel is clearly, he considers Tess to be a very close connection in this post-apocalyptic society and world he now inhabits.
Tess and Joel, and after they kind of talk it out, there's a mention of a guy named Robert, and he's apparently a dealer that has went silent on us. And so go to him and get our guns.
You manage to escape from the quarantine zone by sneaking away through underground tunnels. It's here while you're escaping that you're introduced to spores. So another
Mhm.
way to be infected other than being bitten by clickers or something is inhaling the cordyceps fungal spores, and anything to do with like aerial based infections just Ugh, I don't like that.
Can we okay, but can we talk about how beautiful they look?
I mean, that's another thing about this game. It's very hauntingly beautiful. The beautiful is dangerous.
I especially love the warm colors that they did, but they didn't like do it so much so for it to be vibrant and kind of away from this world, but it's sort of like it still is a part of nature even though it's enemy to humankind. Yeah.
Is it just humans that are actually infected? Because animals avoid the spores as well. Like, there's no wildlife to be found around spores.
I think like with spores, they tend to really collect where things kind of stay. So in terms of like animals, they always migrate. And so spores are never really able to plant themselves into a ecosystem because of that. Really like with people staying around those quarantine zones and as well as like in buildings and stuff, that's because that's where people have lived. And then when they turn into zombies, they eventually develop into clickers and bloaters
Right.
and eventually become these fungal apparitions that we see along walls, floors. It's disgusting,
Yeah, seeing
but
a
it's
clicker up
amazing.
close is just, it makes my skin crawl.
Mhm,
Real quick though, during the same section where you're crawling through this dilapidated basement through the spores, you see another survivor, another guy. He's
mhm.
buried under this rubble and his mask has broken and he's already he's inhaled the spores and he's like begging you to not let him become one of them, one of the infected. So you have the choice as Joel to either keep walking and leave him to die and become an infected or to
Or pop a cap in his ass.
well, his head, but yeah, you
Yeah.
have the choice to mercy kill him. And it's a small but really establishing moment of gameplay where you will face these choices to make that there's no great answer to. There's no morally conscious free response to these situations. You have to kill or live with the guilt of what seems like the merciful option to you, but not to the victim.
It's definitely a theme throughout the series. And during this time, we are actually introduced to the stealth mechanic of it, and as well as the listening
I can hear
portion.
so well, I see outlines through walls.
Exactly. And I kind of like that a little bit. It does make the game a little bit more easier, but I think it would have been fun if instead of seeing the outlines of them, you sort of seen a fog kind of saying like that's where the source is coming from.
The enemy AI was really elaborate for the time. They respond to sounds and movement and everything, and it's really cool. It's really interesting how you can interact with your surroundings to lure them
Yeah, and then
because,
just sneak around. And I'm glad that they gave that liberty to the player. It shows
yeah,
that not every situation needs to be the same.
they only really seem to pay attention to Joel, but not Ellie or your companions.
Yeah.
You'll be ducking behind like a trash can or something, hiding from a clicker, and Ellie will just be walking right past him in order to get to Joel. And I know
Dude,
the NPC AI interaction and all that, but it is kind of funny.
it's a thing that kind of breaks the immersion, but it's not something that the game doesn't automatically fix on its own once you move. Let's get back to telling the story and all that.
Right. They track down and find Robert. He's sitting at this
Yep.
harbor warehouse at the wharf, and he's like,
Mhm.
let's just talk about this. Forget the fact that I took some pot shots and tried to kill y'all."
Like, okay, they do talk to him, but then Robert's like, let's go get them fireflies. And Tessa's
Yeah.
like, that's stupid.
Wave goodbye
Boom.
to your kneecaps, chuckle nuts.
Head gone.
So they kill Robert after he explains that he gave up their weapons to the Fireflies. So yeah,
And guess who turns the corner? Firefly leader, Marlene.
everyone loves Marlene except for Joel.
Well, you can tell she is charismatic.
Yeah.
She's very stoic too.
She doesn't play her hand early in these scenes. She keeps everything close to the chest about what her intentions or full objectives really are.
And of course, she's wounded. She tells them that, hey, you want your guns back? How about you follow me? And then we get to their little hideout. Well, once Marlene gets in, Joel follows through. Ellie tries to stab Joel. Quite an introduction, to be honest.
Really
And
establishes what kind of feisty survivor she is. It's great. Anyway, Marlene tasks Joel and Tess with escorting Ellie through Boston to the Firefly hideout in the Capitol building on the other side of the city. So for a brief time, you have a nice little pseudo father figure, pseudo mother figure with pseudo daughter figure. It's a interesting found family adventure.
Before we even get closer to the city, as soon as night falls, curfew has started for the Fedra.
And unfortunately, while moving through ruined buses and cars, Joel, Tess, and Ellie all get ambushed by a couple of Fedra agents and pinned and checked for infection. And lo and behold, she tests positive.
She's positive for the fungi. After they killed the guards, because Ellie decided to stab them before they could really get the reading, the big secret's out. Ellie reveals her right arm and says, "This is my bite. It's 3 weeks."
Which,
And
given that any infection fully spreads within 48 hours, Joel and Tess are like, bullshit. You would not be alive if it's 3 weeks.
Joel wants to stop it all, but Tess says, "But we need to get our guns. Let's just do this thing and just leave her behind with them."
The line Tess says to Joel after Joel outright refuses to escort Ellie, she's like, I get it. Also, the early stages of this game would have been so much easier if Joel and Tess had just picked up the dead soldiers' assault rifles.
No kidding. Like, they just left those guns there.
I know that they were forced to leave because another group of soldiers were coming to reinforce them, but like, man, pick up those rifles and the rest of the game is a breeze.
Yeah,
After you escape from the soldiers and enter downtown Boston proper, this is
right.
where you truly meet not just infected, but clickers.
Oh gosh, the clickers are probably one of my favorite enemies in the game.
The sounds they make. Ugh.
How they kind of compile these sounds is they had some girl send them some screech audio files, and they kind of put it all together to develop this like clicking, moisty ish. The audio was so real and it was so great.
Right.
And the designs of them where like the shrooms are kind of like coming out of their
Yeah.
face.
It's an interesting take on the zombie archetype.
Yeah, shrooms.
The cordyceps virus has different levels and stages of infection. When you're first infected, you are pretty much a typical zombie. You're a human that's out of control and is going to bite and murder people. Level 2, runners are. You're starting to develop a weird fungal growth over your head and flesh. And then stage 3 is you are just barely recognizable as a human. You are a clicker. This disgusting fungal headed monster that can't even make human like sounds anymore, behave like a human. And of course, then stage 4 is bloaters, where you become a big ol' fungal boy.
It's Big Mama.
Yeah. Although, unfortunately, it is a little hard for me to take the name Clicker seriously, because I remember years ago when this game came out, there was a fan art I saw of Joel holding a TV remote control, and he's like, Clickers.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. So every time
Oh.
every time they said clickers, I was just picturing that piece of fan art. Fucking clickers.
Also, I want to add on the little cycle that you're talking about is that eventually, like, the bloaters sort of go somewhere dark and damp to die, and then they become those spores, and then the whole
Ugh.
cycle starts again.
It's just a unsettling and unnerving version of a zombie apocalypse. The fact that it's all fungal based, like anything fungus with me is I can't. It makes me super grossed out.
I love it.
I do like the sonar. I do like how clickers see through sonar, like they see through sound. That's what their clicking noise is. And
Right.
Joel's,
Echolocation.
if you can see them, they can definitely see you. Unfortunately for them, though, all it takes is just a quick duck behind a counter or box or something, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and also make sure to throw bottles.
This is where I think the first time I was playing, I actually died for the first time because I had managed to outrun the soldiers and outfight them and all that. Some of the death animations are really gruesome and violent. I think there's one where a clicker runs up to Joel and bites his ear off, and it is very graphic death animations and death scenes in this game. Even when you play as Ellie briefly, the death animations are still not as graphic as they are with Joel, but it's still very uncomfortable, especially how she reacts to it.
Oh yeah, and then I especially love the one from the bloater because the bloater is like ripping apart Joel's face, tearing off his jaw, and then
Ugh.
taking out his upper skull. Like
Ugh.
I'm just like, oh my god, I don't want to die from that again.
How your little brother describes how you hit him. Anyway, you get to the Capitol building, and unfortunately, the Fireflies you were supposed to hand Ellie off to are all dead. quite the conundrum.
Well, Tess then mentions Joel's brother Tommy. How about you go see Tommy? He's with the Fireflies.
He's immediately like, how far are we gonna take this girl? Like, when is enough enough? But Tess, she pulls her shirt collar down and reveals she's infected. She was bitten an hour ago.
And says, look at it, Joel. This is 1 hour. This is 3 weeks. This is fucking real, Joel. Oh, and the delivery of that line.
The voice acting is just a perfect bow on everything this game is presenting. This whole package of music, of writing, of dialogue, the voice acting, the delivery of individual lines, it's just the cherry on top.
Yeah, and well, this is no time to be saying goodbyes, and you can just see the pain in Joel's face having to leave such a good friend behind. Ellie kind of pulls him and says, we gotta go. And you can actually see Tess's death, which kind of puts in that cinematic adventure. We see the event happen in front of our
Yeah.
eyes. It's a real interaction because Joel is not ready to talk about this situation, especially with a little girl that kind of is the reason that they got into this mess. I won't say like a real reason, but to Joel, it more than likely was kind of is blaming her. But Ellie is being a compassionate and empathetic person and trying to talk about with Joel because she knows that Tess was very important to him. Well, what's the next plan of action? Joel says he knows a guy that owes him some favors and lives in a small town, like a couple miles away, I think. I think it's like a day's trip.
There is a nice little bit of insight into how Ellie views Joel because right before they leave Boston, Joel lays out the ground rules. You don't talk about Tess, and you do exactly what Joel says. Also, don't talk about your condition, he calls it, because people will either think you're crazy or try to kill you. And he says, repeat everything I said. And she just paraphrases him. She doesn't repeat exactly word for word. She's like, whatever you say goes. And Joel just quietly accepts that as like, yeah, that's fair. That moment, that little interaction just perfectly emphasizes what kind of relationship they're going to have for the foreseeable future. She's going to listen to the gist of what he's doing, but isn't taking him too seriously and kind of doesn't really dislike him, but doesn't really hold him in super high regard either. And Joel acknowledges that and is like, let's just get all this done. Let's just go through the necessary steps. He's not going to die on this hill, really.
He does have the cure, and now that he has it in his hands, he sort of has a responsibility to Tess, at least, to finish this job.
This game does have a crafting mechanic to it. You can craft various items or limited use weapons like Molotov cocktails and knives and all that.
Yeah, and the thing is, all these have different ingredients that you need to find throughout the world, which encourages exploration.
Good thing there's a whole lot of leftover duct tape and scissors just lying around.
Shivs are your kind of like your best friend in this game. They're great for taking down clickers. They're great for unlocking doors that can lead to either secret passages or caches, which can give you a plethora of resources. And there's two other resources that we'll talk about, which is what do they really call it? Do they call it gears or something? I always call it gears.
Yeah, well, that's the menu. That's the menu icon, gears, which you can use to upgrade your weapons. The game only gives you a very limited amount of gears, I guess, in order to upgrade your weapons. By the end of the game, you will not have upgraded your weapons to the fullest extent. You will miss out on some options. You have to pick and choose which weapons to upgrade and to what capacity.
You're going to have to upgrade your weapons to your playstyle. Like with the resources being so scarce throughout the world, and they did it in such a meaningful way to make the player kind of feel that danger of not finding the supplies they need because you can run short on supplies if you're not watching.
Another little bit of Resident Evil DNA mixing itself in. You have to pick and choose your battles and choose what weapons to use and how well are you going to use them. Do you want to use your bullet now or are you going to go for the melee and conserve your ammunition kind of thing? Also, you
Right.
can find pills that can give you various non-weapon upgrades, like you can upgrade your hearing distance or your health recovery or your overall maximum health, that kind of thing. Joel, you've been downing those pills for way too much. I'm cutting you off. I need
I
it,
need
Ellie. I can hear colors, Ellie.
colors.
But yeah, the town of Lincoln, I do like how this section of the game starts off. It's very quiet. They just jump down into some nearby woods as a shortcut. And Ellie's like, I've never been to a place like this where all these
It,
trees are. And you even come across a swarm of fireflies, like actual fireflies. And Ellie's like, wow.
it's sort of seeing wonder in a kid. Hey, like it's kind of sweet to finally see something from this bleak world kind of be so nice.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's a classic tried and true juxtaposition of your main leads. You have Joel, who's the old, grizzled, stoic, cynical veteran. He doesn't really care about anyone but himself and the company he keeps. And then you have Ellie, this young, at this point, naive 14-year-old girl who's already she's been through some shit if you've played the Left Behind DLC, so you know she's been through some rough patches and everything with Tess, but she's optimistic. She sees the world in a brighter light than Joel does. She lingers on the sentimentality of everything. Like when you, at this point, you cross through a music shop, a record shop, and she murmurs to herself how sad and depressing it is that these works of art, all these music tracks are forever unlistened to because no one's around to buy or listen to them anymore. She
And these comments about the environment really make the world really lived in and experienced by the characters themselves.
again, these feel like real people going through an actual story, like an actual series of events to them. How would real people interact in these situations? They're not constantly joking, but they're also not constantly depressed either, you know? Because I think another, not very much of a message of this game, but still, you know, life isn't always necessarily doom and gloom, just as it's full of sadness and depressing stuff, you know? The saddest person in the world can still smile just as easily as the happiest person can frown.
Man, Chase, you turning into a poet?
No time for that though, because as you're going through Lincoln, you see a clicker activate a tripwire bomb. Turns
One
out
of Bill's traps.
Yeah, it turns out Bill, the guy Joel's looking for to get his car, he's rigged this entire town Home Alone style. He is not letting any clickers steal Christmas.
It's entire fort that he's built. Why buy a house when you can have a whole town?
This is the future Fortnite players want.
Exactly. So you kind of navigate through everything. You throw bricks at some of Bill's traps to trigger them.
Or you can just shoot
Um,
them to activate them if you have the ammo to spare. There's two weapons you pick up during this that I really like. First off, you find this lead pipe with scissors on the end as like a makeshift spear stabbing weapon, and this thing is so useful. This thing can just, depending on your difficulty, can one-shot a lot of infected. It's very useful. Also, you find the bow, some bow and arrows. Ooh, I wonder if that will become iconic later.
oh my gosh. Let's do some Hunger Game action.
Yeah, what was up with like teenage girls and bows in the early 2010s? Because you had Hunger Games, you had Ellie, you had,
Merida.
yeah, just, you know, women and bows. I mean, hey, it's a pretty good hobby.
Definitely, if you guys like want to do bow hunting or something, it's definitely a good hobby to get into if you can afford it and are willing to
Yeah.
want to do it.
Also, this is
Mhm.
the first time you use Ellie as like a interactive companion because you come across a locked gate. Ellie suggests, "Why don't you lift me over the fence and I'll unlock it from the other side?" Throughout everything in Boston with Tess, Ellie was just there. She was a pure NPC escort. It was Tess that you interacted with whenever you had to do something. But this is the first
Mhm.
instance of Ellie becoming not just a mindless escort NPC, all right? She's not Ashley from Resident Evil. She can actually contribute. And as you progress through the game, you'll see just how useful she truly becomes. And it's a very gradual and very organic kind of growth to her. She's not an instant badass, and her and Joel are immediately on the same wavelength as each other. It takes a while to get to that level. It really helps build that bond between not just Joel and Ellie, but also the player and Ellie.
You open the door, and a little scene sort of plays out into you being hanging upside down in one of Bill's traps with the fridge as a counterweight.
God dang it, Bill. This whole section, from Joel's perspective, you're playing as Joel, obviously, and everything is upside down. You're just dangling from this rope. Ellie rushes over to the counterweight refrigerator trying to cut it down. There's infected being attracted to the noise, crawling through fences and running at you, and you have to shoot them while upside down. Fortunately, the game is a bit generous in that you do have infinite ammo. You still have to reload after 6 or 7 shots, but you don't have to worry about running out of ammo while you're dangling there. So after Ellie cuts you down, you're about to be overwhelmed by clickers when Bill shows up.
He's a little bit to the extreme compared to what Joel is. Joel is careful, but he's like really careful.
Yeah, paranoid, much as Ellie puts it. Also, good thing he never checked Ellie for any bites. Who knows what would have happened.
Yeah, that would have been quite a different conundrum for sure.
Joel tries to calm the situation down by saying, "Hey, look, we need a car. You owe me a favor." Bill's
Then
like,
Ellie pipes him.
Yeah, Ellie breaks the pipe off the wall and starts hitting him, and he's like, "You almost broke my shooting arm."
Okay, Bill is definitely he is an asshole, but he also is kind of like a lovable asshole at the end of it.
He like waves a machete at Ellie after she almost breaks his arm, and he's like, "You want to go, little girl? Let's go right here, right now."
And Eller's like, "Bring it!"
And Joel's just like, "All right, calm down, you two. Let's just settle this." This is where you meet bloaters in the high school. You want to talk? We already talked about bloaters enough as is, but this is kind of like, I guess, really the first and kind of only boss fight. Like, there's not really boss fights in
Like,
this game, but
to be honest, it's kind of a sad theory that people have about this. They believe that somebody got infected, locked themselves in that janitor's closet, and kind of starved themselves to death and let the infection take over so that they wouldn't hurt anybody.
yeah,
But in the
that's
end,
That's another thing is that throughout the game, you find notes and messages from survivors addressed to loved ones, friends, or even just them jotting their final thoughts down. It just adds to the sense of melancholy and depression that these were real people that had lives and this is what happened to them. Before you run into Bill, there's a little sidetrack into an apartment you can go into. When you enter the apartment, you're immediately ambushed by an infected, and after you kill him and wander around the apartment, you find a note from the guy who was infected saying, "I'm looking for my wife," I think it's implied, who's heading over to the Boston quarantine zone. And he doesn't know what happened to her and he hopes to find her. But you just killed him as an infected, still here in Lincoln. Something that I often found myself, not just in this game, but really zombie apocalypses or apocalypses stories in general, is this is 20 years later. So some of the people that you encounter, like, where were they when this all went down? Some of them could have been born after, some of them could have been full adults when everything happened. I always think about this in these kind of stories, like the clothes that the infected are wearing. Did the people putting those on, they had no idea that this would be the day that they became these monsters that would eventually, years later, be killed in this
mhm.
state. All these bandits and outlaws, like how old were they when the infection happened in 2013? Some of them could have been kids, like Henry, for example. When you meet him later, he looks to be mid to late 20s, I would argue. So
And he does have memories before the time, so he
yeah.
definitely was a kid.
Yeah, so he would have been like 6 or 7 years old when this all went down, or people who were babies who would now be in their very early 20s. And then, of course, you have people like Ellie who have been born long after, and this is all they've known. These are the things that kept running through my mind. Again, not just in this game, but in a lot of zombie apocalypse and these kind of stories, you know? It's like, where were these people the day it happened?
Yeah.
Take David, for example. Who was he before all of this went down? But we'll get to him when we get there.
Yeah, so we then escape the school. We get into a backyard and we go through some houses, but there's this one particular house that really sends a chill down Bill's spine, and it's his partner hanging from a ceiling fan.
And he only
And
ever refers to him as his partner. And those of you who pick up on the implication here, it is pretty heavily implied, but never outright confirmed, that Bill is gay.
yeah, or at least has attraction towards men.
Right. And this is a debate I've had with myself and some other friends of mine where how do we feel about this? Because I for one think it's pretty great to have a character who is gay, and it plays somewhat of a role in the narrative like in this moment, but isn't really outright said. The fact that he's gay isn't the point of the character, you know? There's more to Bill than just his sexuality and who he's attracted to. The fact that he's a paranoid survivor is more of his character than the fact that he's attracted to men. On the
Right.
other hand, though, it kind of gives off the whole bury your gays kind of vibe where it feels like the writers weren't too confident in outright confirming that he's gay. It's only ever implied. So it kind of feels like they're trying to not hide it per se, but it doesn't feel like they're fully embracing it either. They're kind of just pushing it off to the side like they were worried homophobic people were going to freak out about it because it was 2013, you know. We were making
Well,
progress, but still.
yeah, I guess there could have been influence from that, but I actually like that because, like, so hear me out on this. I like it when, like, there's so much kind of creativity that's left up to the player, and as well as having like these implications and stuff like that. And also that, somebody during this time wouldn't be talking about who they liked or didn't like, or who they were attracted to or not attracted to. It's just sort of like you find out these clues for yourself and then it leads to that point. Uh,
Don't get me wrong, I kind of prefer this way where they leave it up to
mhm,
you to come to that decision yourself and they don't spell it out in your face like, "Hey, did I mention I'm gay?" Like, no, that's not really necessary because it's not really relevant to what's going on. I don't know. I can see the argument both ways, but end of the day, I think that this was one of the better ways to go about it. Also,
mhm.
apparently the gay magazine that Ellie swipes off of Bill when he's like, "Hey, don't touch my stuff." On the director's commentary for the game, I think it was Druckmann or someone who pointed out that the guy posing on the magazine cover is one of Naughty Dog's lead concept artists.
What?
Yeah, like they in the commentary they pointed that out as like, "Oh hey, yeah, that's him."
Thank you, concept artists.
Yeah. And just to wrap this conversation up, Naughty Dog isn't one to really shy away from explicitly showing gay characters, obviously. If you've played the Left Behind DLC, then you know that Ellie is, at the very least, bi, because, well, while we're here, is Ellie confirmed to just be attracted to women, or does she have, like, a little
She
bit
has
of...
both.
Oh,
She's both.
okay, because I was gonna say, when she's looking through Bill's magazine, she, does show some interest in male anatomy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I don't know, I just love it that it's sort of just kinda talked about in quantities that kinda are natural instead of kinda inserting them wherever they feel like they need
Right.
them.
And it's natural for the story to explore this. This is, from Ellie's perspective, a coming of age story. She's 14 years old, the age when a lot of kids are discovering themselves and who they're attracted to and what they like. And they're overwhelmed by these feelings and emotions and they don't really know what to do. So, yeah, it's pretty natural for Ellie to be interested or curious about this. She's figuring it all out at a young age, you know?
Back to the story, the partner turns out to be the one who's got a truck up and running due to stealing a battery, which we were supposed to get at the school. Bill, of course, kind of mumbles and cusses out his dead partner a little bit, like trying to leave on me. At the end, they sort of drive a little bit out of town, but Bill's like, "All right, right here, I can get off right here and make it back into town safely." Well, this is where they part ways. And before that, Bill already gave him some tools to siphon some gas from the cars that are through it. He's like, "You'll be surprised by how many vehicles still have gas." I think it gets them to somewhere in Missouri, maybe.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a couple states over.
It's still a long ways, you know.
Ellie finds the cassette tape and is like, "Something from your time, Joel." And he's like, "This is from before my time, I'll have you know, young lady."
Which is another nice little banter. Just hearing that music, kind of enjoying the scenery and them driving down the road. And then it picks up them getting into Pittsburgh. And
Well, glad to see
well,
that the traffic situation hasn't changed.
yeah, because there's just one exit that I think they were no, it was the highway that just got so clogged up. Of course, no one can really take care of that
Yeah.
situation when you're at constant fear of death.
So they're forced to drive through downtown Pittsburgh, and Joel is immediately on alert because he knows, like, this is out far, far out of the quarantine zone. We don't know what to expect here.
Then, just like clockwork, a man comes right out and says, "Help me." And Ellie's like, "Hey, we need to go help him, but he's hurt." No, he's not, and drives. Ooh,
'Cause,
and the song just playing with this,
yeah.
like, it's great.
And once he notices Joel isn't falling for it, the quote unquote injured guy is like, "Son of a bitch," pulls out a gun and is about to shoot him, but gets run over.
Yeah.
And then all these other bandits and raiders pop out of the rubble, and there's like, "All right, get them, boys." Yeah, it definitely does show. It's just another example of Joel being like, "Yeah, I've been on both sides of this situation before. I know how this game is played."
Yeah, because this also implies, to, Joel's history, which considering him to be a bandit, it shows that, well, people that are sort of our protagonists can have bad histories, and we can still love them. They can still be great characters, and, well, it shows another layer of Joel that we kinda suspected, but never really actually got confirmation until this Pittsburgh level.
So now you gotta fight your way through Pittsburgh, fending off infected and raiders.
These raiders have an arsenal for sure. They have a mobile vehicle that has a gun on top that's shooting like 50 cal bullets at you. But we eventually escape and we hop into a window and when we seem like we can catch a breath of fresh air.
Introducing the two brotherly survivors, Henry and Sam. And I really like these two characters. They are a mirror of Joel and Ellie's relationship. You have Henry, who, as we mentioned, is mid to late 20s, judging by his looks, although given this harsh world, he could be younger than that and just looks older. And then Sam, a young kid who looks to be about the same age as Ellie, although I would argue he might be a year or two younger than Ellie. He just seems a little less experienced than Ellie, although that just might be their personal lives. And
And
I
then you kind of see this kind of romance between Ellie and, well, not really romance, it's more of a relationship between Ellie and Sam. I think it's because
Is
they're
it really
two kids.
romance?
No, I
I
don't
didn't
know.
I
I don't
didn't
think
get
it's romance.
No, it's not really romance. It's just a budding young teen friendship kind of thing cuz Sam's probably the first kid she's talked to since Riley and Left Behind.
So
So,
yeah, it's sort of that relationship, a nice one where it starts off right and they get along with each other. They joke
yeah.
around.
They're trying to like throw blueberries in the air and catch it with their mouths and just a moment of childhood innocence for Ellie and Sam.
They do seem to want to spend time with each other a lot more than likely because they are of the same age.
Yeah, and of course, Joel and Henry are a little more skeptical of each other, the two adults, but I feel like Henry warms up to Joel way quicker than he does to Henry.
That's for sure. I
Right.
mean, given the experience that Joel has had, he has a higher wall.
Something I picked up on is how Henry, he acts kind of joyful and a little chill and laid back given the circumstances only around Sam and Ellie. Whenever it's just him and Joel, he immediately goes into like business mode. Shit's gotten real now. So he's
Mhm.
doing it all for his younger brother, Sam. He wants Sam to feel confident and brave because he knows if Henry freaks out about something or panics, then he knows how that's going to impact Sam. Yeah, it's a really great characterization for him to have.
That's for sure.
So Henry takes Joel and Ellie to his quote unquote office, and to be fair, it is a very nice office up in this building. And he points out to Joel, see down there, those raiders? That's our ticket out of here, that gate that they're guarding. At night, it's only a handful of guards, so we can sneak through them by then, and we're gonna meet up with a group of our other survivors outside of town at this radio station. You guys in? And Joel's like, he's reluctant, of course, as always. He's skeptical that the plan's gonna work, but he thinks this is their best option to get out of Pittsburgh, so he'll take it. I really like Henry and Sam. I do like the dynamic they bring. Like I said, at least ostensibly, a little more laid back, not necessarily innocent per se, but they're not as what's the word? Not jolted, but
Not as protective of
jaded.
oneself.
Yeah,
Okay, jaded.
jaded. They're not as jaded as Joel or to a much lesser extent Ellie is. They really are main characters of their own story. We're crossing over with another parallel The Last of Us story, you know what I mean?
hmm
I gotta say, the Pittsburgh section of the game, this is chock full of Easter eggs, and we might as well get through them now because there's a lot of Easter eggs in Pittsburgh.
All right, you list them off.
Well, for starters, shortly after you meet Henry and Sam and join up with them in the apartments, there's one bedroom where you can find like little plush toy versions of previous Naughty Dog characters, Nathan Drake and Jack and Daxter. Seeing Jack and Daxter toys just warmed my heart, and I'm like, oh, that's cute. In the toy shop that you briefly run through, where Sam picks up the toy robot, there's also a few board games sitting on the shelves that are based off of Uncharted and Jack and Daxter. Also, the Irish pub, All Sullivan's, get it? That is directly from Uncharted 3. Like, it even has the same stained glass swan crane picture hanging over the counter. So, yeah, that is directly from Uncharted 3.
And it's great that I don't know, I always found Easter eggs lovely little love notes to us players, at least
Yeah.
players who know the studio.
Sadly, there's no references to Crash Bandicoot, but makes sense given that by this time Naughty Dog no longer had the rights to Crash, but it is sad that he's the only one left out. This isn't really about the Part 1 remake since I consider that its own separate thing, but it did add a few extra things, like there's a reference to The Office in the financial district, like you can find Dunder Mifflin logo here. Also, Part 1 added some new outfits for Ellie and Joel to wear that reference Jack and Daxter, God of War, Resistance, Ratchet and Clank, Sly Cooper. Shadow of the Colossus, Eco, Uncharted, and Kill Bill, so nice lot of references thrown here and there. And one final mention, this is getting ahead of ourselves, but in the final hospital at the last stretch of the game, you can find an eye test chart of various letters that when you spell it out, it spells something, I think it says run, don't give up, you're nearly there, or something along those lines. So given that that's pretty much the end of the game by that point, yeah, pretty fitting. But getting back to the actual story, Joel, Ellie, Henry, and Sam, they conduct their night mission raid to try and sneak past the raider guards past the gate at night, but unfortunately they're spotted. Joel and Ellie get separated from Henry and Sam, and Henry could save them, but he goes back for Sam because he knows, I like you guys, I like you, Joel, I like you, Ellie, but I gotta protect my younger brother. He is my utmost priority. He leaves Joel and Ellie to fend for themselves after they get separated. And honestly, I don't really blame him. I mean, Joel would have done the same thing, as Henry points out later. Is it kind of a dick move? Yeah, but this is the kind of world these characters are in. These are the necessary evil actions that they have to take. You kind of have to leave people out to dry to protect people you are prioritizing. Ellie's like, okay, we have no choice. We're going to have to jump into the water. Joel's like, no, that's stupid. It's way too high up. You don't know how to swim. But she goes and does it anyway. And Joel's like, God damn it, and jumps in right after her into the water below. They wake up on a beach alongside the river. Henry and Sam are there, having pulled them out. Henry's like, oh man, glad we were able to catch up with you. You guys were lucky we were there to pull you out. And Joel knocks Henry down and points a gun at him like, you son of a bitch, you left us to die. Henry counters with the whole, you would have done the same thing. Listen, we're still on the same side. I mean you no ill will. We still have to work together. We have a better chance of surviving if we work together. And after some convincing from Ellie, Joel gives in and relents, and he agrees to continue to team up with Henry and Sam. But I really do enjoy this section of the game where you're moving through the suburbs. You're spending time with Henry and Sam, getting to know them, fighting through backyards, fighting through houses. Kind of reminds me of Resistance 2 in a way. There's a really great sequence where Joel climbs up into the second floor house after taking out an enemy sniper. And he has to cover Henry, Sam, and Ellie as raiders and infected are coming in from all angles. You're just playing Overwatch Angel right here.
Which is a nice change of pace.
You escape through a backyard to the radio station, and it cuts to later that night, and everyone's just having a good time having dinner of canned beans and canned goods. Ellie's like, well, I'm gonna leave you two lovebirds alone. Get some intimate time.
Then starts talking to Sam and tells Sam that, hey, it's going to be all right.
This is the scene that I think really captures everything Ellie is about. Ashley Johnson's performance, her performance in this scene especially, is so stellar, top notch. She's comforting Sam. You don't know it at the time, but he's going through a lot of the same thoughts she probably did when she thought she was going to die. She tries to comfort him. He briefly dwells on the possibility that the infected individuality might still be inside, but they have no control over their physical body anymore, and he worries about that happening to him. And she tells Sam that her worst fear is being left alone.
Which, in this world, I'm sure being alone is quite a conundrum for her. I mean, she's had plenty of people come into her life and then leave her. So she has sort of these abandonment issues. And with Joel, he would rather be alone if he could. He just tolerates people as it is, which shows how much it's kind of like two sides of the spectrum here. We have somebody who was before the time and grew up in this post-apocalyptic world to somebody who was born in this post-apocalyptic world yet still doesn't know how life was behind.
And
So
Ellie leaves Sam to his devices to go back to Joel
Mhm.
and Henry. And after
And
she
then we see
leaves, Sam lifts up his pant leg and it's revealed he's been infected. He was bitten on the ankle at some point.
and
And what's
uh,
even worse is based on how Henry says, oh, I left Sam alone, let him sleep in for the night. He never saw his brother Henry again from that moment onward.
the next thing that he knew was he saw Sam almost taking out Ellie as a infected, and he couldn't pull the trigger, and Joel was saying he's turning end him now and said fuck this. Well, then Henry killed Sam.
He just killed his own brother to Henry. It's essentially in cold blood. He immediately points the gun on Joel and starts screaming, this is your fault. This is all your fault. What have you done? But you and I, we all know he's referring to himself. He doesn't actually mean Joel.
Yeah, but the thing is that he's in such a painful state that
Yeah.
this reaction is real. Like, at least it feels so real.
He is just
And
absolutely devastated by having to have killed his brother. There's tears streaming down his face, his voice is choking up, and
and you can see the moment when he says to himself in his head, "Don't cause any more pain." And so then he shoots himself because he didn't want to kill Joel out of anger. This was not his fault at that last moment, and said he's never going to live with himself and pulled the trigger.
cut to black immediately. It's now fall, it's a few months later. The first time I played through this game, that scene, not only was it so tense, so adrenaline filled with Henry killing himself after killing Sam, we just lost two characters that at this point we had spent a fair amount of time with and had really come to sympathize with and grow to love. And we thought maybe the scene at night where they were having dinner, we thought maybe there's a moment, but no, that's not how things are going to play out.
That's for sure.
And then the cut to fall months later, we don't see the immediate aftermath. We don't see how Joel and Ellie go from there. Okay, it's in the past now. We've moved on and things are different a little bit. We're a little closer together. We see right here, they're in Colorado. They're halfway across the country now. They're closer, but they're also both a little more stoic.
Yeah, and then while you're kind of like walking and traversing through like the dam that we see, and not to mention, okay, can we talk about this level, like this beauty of magnificence with a mountain and pine trees, waterfalls?
Here we
It's
are in Red Dead. But
yeah,
yeah, this is such a breathtaking, beautiful mountain alpine area.
it's kind of like a reward to, at least it was a reward to me as a player after going through all that stuff. It's like, here's a nice beautiful moment that you can talk about, but it's, you kind of see where Joel comes from in terms
Yeah.
of being hurt so many times, and then it's hard to enjoy the small things in life, and it really takes somebody who hasn't experienced those things to help you see that light again. And now Ellie is starting to see the darker side of the world, that not everything works out.
By this point, Ellie has lost more or less her sense of true innocence because she has killed someone at this point. She now knows how to fight back. She now knows how to wield a gun. She saved Joel's life by killing a man back in Pittsburgh, so she's no longer that innocent, naive child she was back when you first saw her.
That's for sure. We see a grave of who I'm guessing was a kid, like a very young kid, who has their favorite teddy bear placed upon a cross overlooking this waterfall and beautiful scenery. And I think having this in touch with like what has recently happened, and kind of like it was a proper moment for Ellie to bring it up, but Joel still doesn't want to talk about it. It shows that, like, even though Joel has grown closer to Ellie, there are just some things that he just can't handle.
Like the relationship with his brother. Speaking of which, this is where we finally reunite with Joel's brother Tommy.
Yep, he's my brother.
Yeah. As Joel explains it, him and Tommy had a falling out in the years between 2013 and 2033. Tommy joined up with the Fireflies, and him and Joel had a huge disagreement and haven't really kept in touch all that much. And although Tommy's left the Fireflies now, Joel is hoping he knows where, he can point them in the right direction to find where other Fireflies are. Tommy has done quite well for himself. He's basically the leader of this town of survivors out here in the mountains. They have power, they have food, everything. They're doing pretty all right for themselves.
And really, it shows that this group is very tightly knitted, considering all their families and how much they're willing to sacrifice for each other's safety. They know each other. They've seen each other at probably the bar they have in town. Now they're out there as a common unit to bring a strong strength back to the town.
This unity is in very stark contrast to what's going on between Joel and Ellie in this sequence because Ellie overhears Joel agreeing to hand Ellie over to Tommy, or at least what she perceives as Joel agreeing. He actually is much more reserved and reluctant about it. And she steals one of Tommy's horses and runs off into the wilderness, forcing Joel and Tommy to run off after her. This is where all the tension between Joel and Ellie comes out. This is where she just airs her grievances and frustration with Joel, and Joel likewise does the same to her. Emotions boil over here.
And even with Ellie trying to reach out to Joel and say, "Look, I'm sorry for what happened to Sarah." Just like that pain kind of came back to me as a player.
Hmm.
And I know it came back to Joel, him just telling her that she's treading on some mighty thin ice.
Yeah. He finds her reading a diary of a young girl who lived in that house all those years ago. And it does make you wonder, what Ellie's life would have been if things had just gone normal, if the infection hadn't spread. Who would she have been? What life would she have led? But like you said, Joel, he just gets so angry about bringing up Sarah, and he says to Ellie, "You're not my daughter, and I sure as hell ain't your dad."
He's trying to distance himself because he knows he is developing this relationship, and we have this sense of hurt for Joel, but we also know this would be good for him, watching out for somebody who always had people leave her. Tommy then says, I think I will take that girl off your hands and I'll take him to the Fireflies. Joel says, well, I kind of want to hold on to this horse a little bit. Actually takes Ellie from off her horse and says, we can go find them ourselves. It's very relieving. Tommy then says they're holed up in Utah. I forgot the exact name of the university, but it's in the science building. The building that
Eastern
looks like
Colorado
a giant
University.
mirror. Oh, that's where it was. Okay, so it was Eastern Colorado University. Go
Yeah.
Bighorns.
So yeah, we say goodbye to Tommy, and Joel and Ellie are once again on horseback heading to University of Eastern Colorado. And the horse's name, Callus, I think it was.
Yeah, I believe that was it.
Ellie immediately becomes attached to Callus the horse, and it just brings you back to like, yeah, she still has that sense of sentimentality in her. She loves animals. The University of Eastern Colorado. As two people who were in college when COVID hit, yeah, seeing a university campus ground this abandoned, it kind of hits a little different.
It does, for sure. I mean, given that students were mostly in their dorms at the time and would rarely go outside,
Yeah.
or at least just go eat and then go back to their dorms.
There was one part of campus where you and I went to that looked something like straight out of The Last of Us. It was like a lot of overgrown vines and grass over this old dorm that hadn't really been inhabited. So yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
a lot.
I really do like how by this point Joel and Ellie have patched things up a little bit and are on pretty warm terms again. The little bits of banter and interactions between them as you're going through this relatively quiet and somewhat calm college campus. There's not really a whole lot of combat or threat during this era. There's a few infected, but not many. Joel's just talking about what his life was like. He's opening up to Ellie again, really for the first time. He talks about how he had Sarah at a very young age, so he never really had the chance to go to college, but he had some friends. They're making progress after they just let all their dirty laundry out in the previous section.
After kind of going through and deeper into the college a little more, we get to see a nice little pack of monkeys. Oh, they so cute.
Monkey.
Monkey go ooh ooh ah ah.
But then, as if you listen in on the scientist tape recorders throughout the campus, you find out they were experimenting on those monkeys and they're super infected, so don't pet them.
Yeah, don't go close to them. And Ellie even comments, "Good thing we didn't mess with those monkeys."
So Joel listens to the tape recorder, hoping, well, okay, maybe he left behind a message of where the fireflies went. He just kind of skips through the recordings like, oh, will this guy ever shut up about his life story and regrets and philosophy? And eventually he tells you they're in Salt Lake City. If you want to find the fireflies, that's where they're at. So Joel and Ellie are like, great, let's go there. Hey, what's that flashlight on the other side of the building?
Get down.
A group of raiders have entered the campus and they are on the hunt for Joel and Ellie. So now you got to fight your way out of college.
That's kind of like going over grades. Got to fight your way out of college.
Yeah.
So
Joel's like, so this is what finals are like.
this is chemistry. As we kind of get closer and closer toward the exits, a little accident happens on the second floor. Joel falls out from this guy who tackled him. He gets impaled. Gets
There-
impaled by a rod.
He falls onto a metal rod that goes right through his abdomen and just, ugh, that was a
Oh,
nasty wound. They get back on Callus the horse, and for a moment you think everything's gonna be all right, everything's fine. Joel's heavily wounded, but we're fine. Everything's good. We're out. And then he falls off the horse and collapses. And Ellie
mm,
just immediately panics and is like, Joel, you gotta tell me what to do. You have to tell, please, you gotta tell me what to do.
and then blackout.
There's so much to say about this moment. Much like the scene with Henry and Sam, it just leaves you right at the edge of your seat what happens next. It fully cements at this point Ellie sees Joel as her father figure. And
Mhm.
okay, there's two ways to go about this. Did you think Joel was actually dead when this happened the first time you went through this?
Yes, I did personally, just because there was, like, no mention of it, but I was like, back in my head, I'm thinking like, "Nah, there's no way they would kill him off like
Yeah.
that."
I went into this game mostly blind. So, like, I knew the gist of the game, and I think I had a general understanding of everything up to, like, the Pittsburgh section just from what I picked up at the time. But I basically knew nothing of the game past Pittsburgh. So, seeing this scene, I honestly didn't know what to think if Joel was actually dead or not, because it wouldn't surprise me if he is, but at the same time, yeah, I didn't know. I was torn. I could have sworn there's more to Joel. Like, I feel like there's more to Joel than what we've seen so far. So, is he dead? The second thing I want to bring up is this is the point where the Left Behind DLC comes into play. And you want to take a slight detour to talk about this?
Sure, but I will tell you, I am not too familiar with it as I only played through it once. But it shows the relationship between Ellie and Riley. They're kind of like sneaking around and being kids, having
Yeah.
fun with each other and doing things to make memories.
The Left Behind DLC, it shifts between two time periods. It shifts between right now, where it picks up right as Joel falls off the horse. Ellie has moved Callus and Joel into an abandoned mall. It's winter time now. And it also cuts between 3 weeks before the events of the game itself proper. It's how Ellie got infected. She is in boarding school and she runs into her old friend Riley, another girl who has joined up with the Fireflies. And Riley's like, hey, I'm gonna be shipping off with the Fireflies soon. How about you and I have one last day together as friends? Riley convinces her, and they sneak out to a mall on the outskirts of the quarantine zone. And they're just kids. They're just young teenagers. They're throwing rocks at abandoned cars, having a contest to see who can break the most windows. They break into a Halloween store and try on different masks.
Riding the carousel.
While all this is going down, it's cutting between these two time periods. The contrast of the setting. It's a mall in both time periods, but the time with Riley, Ellie is just a kid. It's warm. It's full of nice, warm light. There's music. There's joy. The overgrown grass and trees. It's just a very much more aesthetically pleasing locale.
And
Contrast
then
that to the other mall, the Colorado mall that her and Joel are hiding in. It's winter, it's disheveled, there's clickers. The raiders that attacked them at the college have followed them and they're looking through the mall trying to find them. And Ellie herself, she's no longer that innocent, carefree kid. She is a hardened, jaded survivor. In this mall sequence, her and Riley have a very close, intimate time where they listen to a song, they dance together, they have a bit of a falling out over their future, but they come together at the end, and Riley and Ellie, they kiss each other. And it's a
Mhm.
very heartwarming, touching moment. But then that moment is interrupted by a swarm of infected who have broken into the mall. They manage to escape, but it's too late. They've both been bitten. They just have a moment of, we're gonna die soon. Let's just spend this moment together. And yeah,
Ellie was the only one who didn't turn.
yeah, Riley's gone. There's a moment where Riley considers committing suicide for the both of them, that this is the only other way out. They ultimately refuse. Riley convinces Ellie to fight on, to live, make the best of these final moments. I couldn't help but think the butterfly effect of Riley. If Riley hadn't convinced Ellie to go outside and go to the mall, she would never have gotten infected, or at least most likely not have. And she wouldn't have known she was immune. She never would have known that. Ellie could have gone her whole life not knowing how special she is without Riley. And also, they could have committed suicide right there. Riley had a gun. Ellie would never have known she was immune. They would have killed themselves, and none of this game would have happened. So,
Mhm.
and cut back to the present. Ellie fends off the raiders and makes her way back to Joel, gives him medicine that she scrounged up, and they're back on Callus and they head off into the woods. So that was the Left Behind DLC. Yeah, it's such a intimate, close moment of Ellie's backstory. And it really does add a lot of context to who Ellie is and what she's dealt with.
It was like a short punch to us, the player, in terms of Ellie's history, which I'm glad that where they put it, because since this is the time when we start to play Ellie, in the
Right.
original, you didn't get this DLC. Instead, next scene is a cute little rabbit coming right out of its hole.
And then it just gets shot by an arrow.
And who shot it? Ellie.
It's the middle of winter now out in this mountain winter forest. Back to our earlier discussion, I for a moment thought Joel was genuinely dead and we're going to play as Ellie for the rest of the game.
That's what I thought too, and we had to somehow get to Utah on our own.
Yeah, it kind of helps that the game itself is vague about Joel's fate. It takes a while for it to be confirmed that Joel is still alive. Ellie more or less acts like she's been on her own for a while, which, given Joel's condition still, she pretty much has been. She shoots a deer and chases after it, following its blood trail in the snow.
Well, two others tracked the blood as well. They don't seem to be really the trusting type.
This is David and his one of his followers.
So David, when I first saw him, I didn't know what to expect until
Yeah.
he started talking to me, and I'm just like, I know this sort of like soft talk that people who like our leaders are sort of like a little bit more of a manipulative type. That's
Yeah.
why they talk so soft. That way their threats don't seem so horrible.
This Charles Manson-esque looking dude, he is the first time I saw him, I'm like, okay, something's up with this guy because he's too trusting. You know what I mean? He tries to make himself too likable to Ellie. He comes across as, oh, we were hunting the same deer. Mind if we like split it or something? You're immediately, we've dealt with too many people that are untrustworthy. We've dealt with too many people who we thought we could trust. And Nolan North's performance it adds so much depth and layer to David. He never swears. He is very soft spoken and very accommodating of Ellie. He tries to not make her feel threatened at all, which ironically, like I said, for me, tipped me off of like, he's trying way too hard to be not much of a threat. In a world where everyone has been on guard, everyone has been very suspicious of one another, why is this guy so comforting? Why is he so welcoming of a stranger?
Only if he's after something. So they strike up, well, we're willing to trade anything. Need anything like ammo, guns, and then she says medicine. Do you have any antibiotics? And then that's kind of a hint to you as a player that Joel is still alive. Who else would need antibiotics right now? And as they wait, some zombies decide to come around
We're
and
not
are now
using the Z word. They're infected.
fine. The infected come around and they are now trying to get in to take out Ellie and David. It's sort of like builds this relationship where you are only working with the guy to have Ellie survive, which is also like what Ellie would think, even though he's kind of a off-putting guy. Right now we need somebody to help us, but she knows to keep her distance with him, and we fight through all these infected and kind of hold our own. That kind of solidifies Ellie as more of a badass, just saying. Finally, after that's all done, she gives him the deer, but a little line from David sends chills down like even my spine. He said he sent a group into the city to gather supplies, and only a few came back. Said that the rest were killed by a crazy old man with a little girl. Says everything happens for a reason. And now she needs to lead them away from Joel, where we see after she gave the antibiotics and set that aside. I do like the comments from David's like subordinates just being like David's losing it, because it shows that there is strife within the group.
Yeah, I mean, he's a staple cult figure. He rules through fear and manipulation. Everyone only follows him because they don't think they have any better chances without him. But it's very clear things are falling apart because he is not that capable of a leader.
That's for sure. And then he's trying to really get Ellie for some reason.
Yeah, he is
Yeah,
everything.
we'll get into it. We'll get into it when we get to the
They
part.
shoot Callus, the
They do
horse.
shoot Callus. Now we have to like run like on our own 2 feet, abandoning our bestest steed.
I do like
We
this location. It's on this resort town on this mountain lake, and it's middle of winter. So yeah, it's just a very interesting setting choice, but I really like it. It also
Yeah.
kind of adds to the whole, camp slasher vibe of this cult.
Yeah, I can definitely get that from David's group. Speaking of David's group, they're all over the place. They're swarming. It's like you can't even breathe without them coming around the corner. You eventually get captured and taken to a holding cell. Here we kind of get a glimpse into what David wants to have with Ellie.
He's chopping up a body. Yeah, they're cannibals, just to let you know, FYI.
The subordinate that we had met earlier that went to get the antibiotics is chopping up the dead bodies of, I'm guessing, people he's known, like from all the
Yeah.
people that we've killed.
Or at least
Um,
kind of like Ellie, people they've captured.
yeah,
It is
and
winter. There ain't no party like a Donner party.
I guess so. Well, David kind of wants more from Ellie. It really starts,
Yeah, when he put the
yeah.
way he talked to her and then put his hand on her hand, I'm just like, ugh. You talk about the infected making my skin crawl, but David.
And like, good for Ellie, like staying calm just to break that sucker's finger.
Yeah,
Because
she's like, tell them Ellie is the little girl who broke your fucking finger.
that's
Ah,
for sure. We get back to Joel. Of course, he's still sick, but he is conscious. And well, there's two stragglers that are still around, kind of like looking, and like she wouldn't come back here and not have like a cache or something. Like they're looking for basically supplies, but they also are looking into what she was probably protecting. Well, they found out the hard way. Joel comes out. He probably still is hurting from the thing, but he's
yeah.
better now with the antibiotics. And he just punches them, takes them out. And now we get to see a torture scene.
He interrogates two of David's followers very brutally, and this is who Joel was right before the game started. The scene with Robert when he was still with Tess back in Boston, that's who Joel has been for pretty much the last 20 years. And that's coming out again here as he just brutally murders both of them really, David's followers for information on Ellie. Oh yeah, this is pissed off daddy mode, Joel. He finds out where Ellie is, and it is rampage time. After everything with David, while you have fought back a little bit as Ellie, she's still out of her depth. So now as Joel, with your full arsenal and supplies at your disposal, it is so cathartic to just tear your way through David's camp and all these survivors. Ellie uses this moment to escape by stabbing David's partner. And now, at this point, you have to run around this winter town avoiding contact with anybody because Ellie doesn't really have her weapons anymore. She can't fight them off. It's in the middle of a blizzard, too, so that just adds to the tension of this whole town is out looking for you. Ellie seeks shelter into a restaurant. David follows her, and this is, again, not a boss fight. It's more of a sequence, but
So with this boss scene with David in the restaurant, there's a lot of dynamic things that you need to watch out for.
much like with Sarah in the game's prologue, you are playing this section through Ellie's perspective. And yeah, she's definitely much more of a fighter than Sarah was, but still, she is still a 14-year-old girl without any real weapons up against a cannibalistic cult leader killer.
That also wants to have her.
Stop saying that. Yeah, in this restaurant, you have to avoid stepping on plates. You have to set places on fire.
It's a lot of stuff going on, and I love this boss fight because it's definitely crazy. After I think 3 or 5 times you stabbed David in the back, he sort of pins her down, and
Yeah,
then
and the whole
it's
restaurant is burning down around you, which just adds to the set piece.
right, and it's just like this guy is so freaking crazy. He wants what he wants, but in this sort of situation shows how much off the deep end he is. And then Ellie is reaching for a machete. She grabs it and then hit David. And oh my God, so much pain and relief that's in Ellie. Like you can just see her as like throws down her first machete. It's like out of like I gotta kill him, and then her every single cut, she's closing her
She is
eyes and she's
just
kind of
hacking.
crying.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
Look up catharsis in the dictionary. You just see this scene of Ellie hacking away at David's face.
Oh my gosh, it felt so good to kill that motherfucker.
And from Ellie of all characters. I feel like if Joel had been the one to do it, like, yeah, he still would have been dead and it would have felt good, but Ellie being the one to do it, Now that's the good stuff right there.
Speaking of Joel, Joel comes right behind her after a couple of swings and says, "Ellie, Ellie," and then she's still trying to fight because she thinks it's another gang member. But then he takes her head and stares at her and says, "It's me. It's okay, baby girl." And oh my god, dude, that really solidified the relationship right there.
Mhm.
Like now, it's really become a father daughter. It's such a great relationship that they have with each other, and her stuttering her words and he's saying, I know, you don't have to say anything, I know."
That cut to black is the first cut to black that actually ended on not exactly a happy note, but on a bittersweet moment. Joel and Ellie have reunited, and David's dead, and Ellie is obviously very emotionally devastated and overwhelmed, and Joel isn't exactly feeling all that great either. But this cut to black, this time skip, it feels good. Anyway, but
um
yeah, now it's springtime, snow's melted, and we're in Salt Lake City.
yeah, we see the hospital from here. All of a sudden Ellie isn't there. Now we're chasing Ellie and chasing whatever she's chasing. It's sort of this music again, so nice and serene. We're wondering, wow.
And here we come to what is, arguably without a doubt, the most iconic and recognizable scene in all of The Last of Us: the giraffes.
We've seen all kinds of toys, giraffes from Sarah's room
Mhm.
to the school parking lot.
There was a painting, there were some giraffe paintings on a wall at one point. Giraffes have been a recurring image and motif of innocence or calmness, peacefulness throughout the game.
Then we get to pet a giraffe. That would be like so sick. Can you imagine like around a campfire and just being like, "Yeah, I went to Salt Lake City and I pet a giraffe. What did you do?"
There's a reason why it's so iconic, and it's what a lot of people associate when they think of The Last of Us. It's Joel and Ellie having a moment of appreciating nature, what the state of the world in a more positive sense, looking at this majestic group of giraffes just living their lives, and they're not threatened, they're not concerned with anything, they're just having a moment as father and daughter.
And this is a moment for the player as well because you don't have to move. You can just sit there and just enjoy it with our characters. I think that really helps us grow closer to them because we know what they've been through and we been through it too because we've seen their pain. We've seen the struggles they've had to go through and it's just something for us as a player to finally take a mental break from it.
Also, it's around this point that Ellie shows a photo of Sarah, and this is the first time Joel doesn't get angry or upset while thinking of Sarah. This moment to me solidified Joel has transitioned from Sarah to Ellie. He still remembers Sarah, he still loved her and everything, but now he has accepted Ellie is my child, my baby girl, and I will care for her the same way I did with Sarah. Sarah's gone, but she lives on vicariously somewhat through Ellie. And
Um
now comes the moment we've all been waiting for. We finally reunite with the Fireflies at the hospital.
and we're taken to the hospital and Marlene's there, ripe as rain.
Mm-hmm.
Right as rain, I mean.
Joel wakes up in a hospital bed with Marlene. Immediately freaks out, like, "Well, wait, where's Ellie? What happened?"
She assures Joel that Ellie's safe. They're just preparing for a surgery. Ellie will have to die in order for there to be a chance at a cure.
They can't retrieve what makes her immune without destroying her brain.
Well, that doesn't sit right with Joel, and rightfully so. And now we're on a mission to go find Ellie. And this
Yeah.
is when we're finally given an assault rifle.
Could have used that 8 months ago. Basically, the 11th hour upgrade that a lot of games have, where you're at the last home stretch of the game, we're throwing some of the toughest enemies your way, but here, you know what? Here's a brand new shiny gun. Go nuts. And you are just tearing your way through this hospital fighting off the fireflies.
Hmm.
You enter the surgery room where a group of doctors are around Ellie. They haven't started yet, but they're about to. One doctor blocks your way, and the game gives you no choice. You have to kill him. It doesn't matter where you shoot, he dies. And the guy probably had a family. He didn't have to die, you know. Joel, after killing the surgeon, he picks up Ellie and dares the Fireflies to stop him. Well, it turns out the Fireflies accept his dare and they start rushing after him, shooting at him.
Oh boy. And it's kind of like the very first scene, or at least first section, where we're carrying Sarah to safety. We're carrying Ellie to get out.
Thematic parallels!
As you run and get away from them, you finally get down an elevator and Marlene's waiting for you in the parking garage.
You would think she would have had backup with her, but she tries to convince Joel that just leave Ellie. You know, she's probably going to be torn apart apart by infected out there or killed and murdered by other humans. For a
She's the key to saving so many lives too.
Yeah, exactly. Joel has this look of maybe you're right, and then cut to Joel in the car driving down the highway. And you're left wondering, what choice did he make? What decision did he come to? Did he leave Ellie? Did he take her with him?
Hear a familiar voice coming from the back seat,
Ellie's waking up, still in the hospital gown. She's like, what happened? Where am I?
and he told her, "Well, the Fireflies said they just didn't need you anymore. There's plenty of other people that they got the samples that they needed."
Well, as we've come to find out, it is a lie, but from Ellie's perspective in that moment, she's like, so we did all this for nothing. Cut back to the parking garage with Marlene. It turns out Joel shot her. He was able to sneak a quick shot on her.
Oh wow. And this
Yeah.
solidified Joel as sort of like this
Yeah, so
villain.
I wanted to wrap the story up before we got here, but let's talk about this. This whole last section of fighting your way through the hospital, grabbing Ellie, and then killing Marlene, up to this point, we have sympathized with Joel. We have played as Joel. He is a character, but we, the player, look through his eyes. But this was the moment where I broke away because this is Joel acting purely on emotional selfishness. Now, it's a question of what would you do in the situation? And this was the whole intention of Joel's decision right here. This is what Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog wanted players to feel. They wanted to feel very morally conflicted about this. We know Joel is a survivor. He cares for himself and his kin. He doesn't care about more abstract or bigger picture thoughts. To him, Ellie is his daughter. He is not losing another daughter, not again. To him, it doesn't matter about a cure. And there's an argument to be had that would a cure even work? Would Ellie's sacrifice actually mean something? Now, for what it's worth, Neil Druckmann himself has clarified that yes, Ellie would have provided a cure. Now, there's death of the author and all that. We don't know, based on what the game tells us, if it could have been all for nothing. But I, for one, will go with this. I will go with word of God that Ellie could have provided a cure. What the Fireflies would have done with that cure is up in the air. They're not exactly the most noble group, despite what they claim. But this sequence, you're killing people who didn't have to die. Yeah, they're trying to stop you. They're soldiers, but you could have avoided this. They didn't want to do this, Joel. You're making them do this. You kill the surgeon, and who knows how many actual surgeons there are out there in the world left, for no reason, purely for his own motivation. He's not thinking about all the lives that could be saved. He's not thinking about the lives he's ending. He just cares about rescuing his daughter. And yeah, I get it. He is a father. This is what he's going to do. He's not going to just lie down and let this happen. And this is what I took out of it. This was my interpretation. You're not supposed to sympathize with Joel, at least like this. He is acting selfish for his own motivation and reasons, like I said, at the cost of everyone else. He is not supposed to be a purely morally positive person. He is an individual survivor. He is not a morally white character. He is not a pure positive person. I mean, you call him a murderer, call him an asshole. That's all true. He is a real, quote unquote, real person acting emotionally in a moment of vulnerability. He's not thinking things through. He's not thinking about anyone else but Ellie. And I think we're supposed to disagree with him on this decision. Seeing him driving away with Ellie in the back seat to what he thinks as a happy ending, it's not. He's lying to Ellie, and he's just killed a bunch of people who he didn't have to at the cost of who knows how many other lives. I wouldn't call him a villain. That's too simplistic for this type of story. And that moment, way back in the beginning, when he told Tommy to ignore the family with a kid because they have to look out for themselves. Joel's never really made, or at least he's never always prioritized the morally ethical decision. He's prioritized himself. And that's my thought on the matter.
I felt like I would have done the same personally. I know I'm a horrible person for thinking that, but I think that since I'm aware of it, that I would do the same. I don't know. It's just like I don't agree with what he did. I wouldn't agree with myself for what I did, but it's something that I feel, I don't know.
I don't know what I would have done either. I like to say that I always prioritize the needs of the many over the few. Maybe I'm
Mhm.
just an emotionally distant person, but I don't know if I would have done the same as Joel in this situation. Now, granted, I'm not a father. I have never been in this sort of situation where I had to choose to sacrifice someone I held dear. I hope I never do have to be put in that kind of situation. I don't know what I would ultimately do. I like to think I would make the quote unquote right decision, but would I? It's one of those
Mhm.
things where you don't know what you would do until you're in that scenario. Everyone likes to think that they are in the right, that they made the logical best decision, but no, we don't. We make mistakes all the time. We act on instinct and emotion. Yeah, I don't know what I would have done in Joel's position.
Yeah.
That's what we're left to think of as they drive back to Tommy's town. We're left to just stir in our own thoughts of how do we feel about Joel as a character? Would we have done the same? Would we not have done the same as Joel?
Yeah, we get a little hint that there might be some discourse down the road because of this
Yeah.
decision.
It's pretty clear Ellie doesn't believe what Joel said to her. She knows he's lying. She knows something's up with him, but she doesn't want to press it and she doesn't want to dwell on it further.
Well,
And that's where,
that wraps up Last of Us.
yeah, that's where the game ends. It just ends with them taking shelter with Tommy and Ellie and Joel. There's probably a rift forming there.
That is The Last of Us. We're all done.
Oh boy. This was
It's a heavy episode.
Yeah, this game it really is a game you can have all these different conversations and topics about. It's rich with texture and drama and narrative. There's so many aspects of this game we can talk about. That's not to say other games we've talked about or are going to talk about don't, but The Last of Us is special. It has the legacy of one of the most critically acclaimed, arguably influential video games of like the last decade for a reason.
That's right. Said about this game. This game is a masterpiece, a frontier to many games within the future.
You can't talk about stories in video games without mentioning The Last of Us. It came at a time when all the elements were there to tell this type of story in this way. It shifted how people perceived this medium. And games like this have existed before, but this was different. And since then, we've seen tons of games in this style, not just gameplay wise, but story wise. We've seen more and more games take themselves seriously and go for heavier, deeper topics and conversation pieces. And now, The Last of Us is getting a TV show on HBO.
To be honest, I'm not really looking forward to it.
I
Rehash of what the game was. I don't want it.
I have faith in Pedro Pascal, and also it's being made by the same guy who did Chernobyl, so yeah, I have faith in it. It's on HBO, so that'll give it a budget at least. We'll wait and see how we feel about it when we get there, but that's The Last of Us.
Yeah, and well, I want to say thank you to you, the listeners, and
Thank you for
thank you
sticking with us
for
for this long.
sticking. Yeah, because it's a long episode for sure,
Yeah.
and I'm
Um,
sure we're just like some voices in the back of your living room as you're like washing some dishes or something.
yeah, but it really does mean a lot to us that you're listening. And who knows, one day we might cover The Last of Us Part 2. I still have to play it, but when we get there, for now, I've been Chase.
I'm Ben Garrett.
Don't forget to email us or leave us any questions or feedback at backwardscompatiblepod@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening.
Take care.
Fuck clickers.